Tonight on Spotlight, how the IRA forced this teenager to meet the man she said had raped her and then told her to keep silent.
My mum came up and asked me outright, "What's wrong, Maria? Has anybody touched you?" And I had been told by the IRA that I wasn't allowed to tell anybody. I couldn't even go to my own parents and say, "This is what's happened."
Keep it quiet there, folks.
Two by two, and it's me and you falling from the yellow sky.
This is Maria Cahill, daughter of one of the Republican movement's most famous families.
Cause dreams are a kite on a windy day, free as a boat by the pier.
Within days of this video being recorded, she says she underwent a prolonged cycle of sexual abuse, including rape, by a member of the IRA. She was 16 years old. This is the man she accuses, former Republican prisoner Martin Morris, her uncle by marriage, who worked alongside her at the West Belfast Festival's radio station.
For Cookie McKean, age 5.
He strenuously denies the allegations, and earlier this year he was acquitted in court when Maria Cahill withdrew her evidence against him. That looked like the end of a long and painful episode that divided a family. No one, apart from Maria Cahill and Martin Morris, can be certain of the whole truth about what happened, and they are two people who tell completely different stories. Spotlight has spent months conducting a series of interviews with Maria Cahill, and we've seen evidence showing she's been telling the same story for years. We've also put detailed questions to Martin Morris, and we know that he has consistently denied being an abuser. But tonight's Spotlight is not about the truth or otherwise of Maria Cahill's allegations of abuse. We're investigating what happened after she made them, how the IRA put her through a secret investigation that lasted for months, culminating in a kangaroo court and cover-up that Maria Cahill's friends and family say left her deeply traumatised.
People used their positions within the IRA to silence me. I wanted those people who are in powerful positions in government and within the Republican movement to admit that it was wrong and it was damaging.
And we look at what happened when she eventually told her story to police and named the IRA's investigators. How a politically sensitive case became beset by delays and failures, leading to her loss of faith in the justice system and the collapse of 3 separate trials.
Justice can be blind, but it shouldn't be stupid.
As a woman telling the police she'd been raped, Maria Cahill was entitled to a lifetime of anonymity under the law. But tonight she waives that right to tell how the Republican movement responded to her allegations by first investigating them, then burying them, and imposing a code of silence in order to protect the movement.
They didn't allow victims to go to the police. They swore them to secrecy. They did everything that the Catholic Church was guilty of doing.
What age were you in this one?
16.
Maria Cahill was born Republican royalty. Her great-uncle was Joe Cahill. Sentenced to hang in the 1940s for the murder of a policeman, he survived to become one of the founders of the Provisional IRA.
What's going to happen to you now? I'll have to go deeper underground.
My father's family would have been staunchly Republican, but it wouldn't have been until the latter stages of primary school. when I became aware that Joe would have been fairly well known within Republican circles.
Joe Cahill was more than well known. He was notorious. Once a renowned arms smuggler, he became the IRA's chief of staff.
Round about the middle of 1970, and I saw that as the opportune time to strike out the Brits.
But to Maria Cahill, he was just Uncle Joe. What kind of relationship did you have with him?
Really good, actually. We got on very well. It was like a grandfather-granddaughter relationship.
Joe Cahill was also a long-time ally of Gerry Adams. That's why Sinn Féin sent him to prepare Irish Americans for the 1994 IRA ceasefire. President Clinton granted him a special visa to enter America. Of course, the person in this photograph needs no introduction.
No, it's Gerry Adams. He was a family friend of my grandfather and grandmother's, so you would have seen him about in and out of the house and things. There was a family connection with Gerry for years.
Her second cousin, Siobhan O'Hanlon, was the only IRA member to survive the SAS shooting in Gibraltar. A convicted bomber, she later became Adams' assistant and a member of Sinn Féin's talks team. She died in 2006. Martin Morris married into that extended family and became part of what was then the West Belfast establishment. He was active in parades disputes, and he was a spokesman for Community Restorative Justice, the organisation that Republicans then viewed as an alternative to the RUC. But Maria Cahill knew him as a member of the IRA.
He would have been a very prominent Republican. I knew what Martin Morris's role was within the IRA in the Upper Springfield. He spoke about it himself with me on numerous occasions.
1997, the year of Maria Cahill's 16th birthday, was still a time of immense tension. After more than a year of selected bombings and murders, the IRA called its second ceasefire that summer.
Within the past half hour, the IRA has issued a statement announcing what it calls...
But it remained a serious threat. Maria Cahill says it was around the time of the second ceasefire that she was sitting in Martin Morris's house when he walked in with a neighbour. This man, Joe McCulloch, later to become one of Gerry Adams' bodyguards.
They said, well, we want to speak to you. One of them got up and pulled the telephone cord out of the wall, and the two men immediately launched into a conversation of, we've been keeping our eye on you, you're a good Republican, and we think that you should come and work for us. We would like you to move guns around for us. But immediately I could feel the back of my neck starting, the hairs standing up. I was sweating, and at that point I was saying, no, I don't want to be moving anything. I'm going to do my A-levels next year.
Joe McCulloch has denied this meeting ever took place, but Maria Cahill maintains that Martin Morris deliberately set up the encounter in order to help groom her for abuse.
The initial gun conversation, I believe now, was very cleverly done on his part, because it then put that firmly on my head that this person had access to weaponry, so then it stopped me from disclosing to anybody when the abuse was taking place. And it was a very short space of time, certainly no more than maybe a day, 2 days, I think, between that happening and the first incident of abuse.
It was August 1997. Maria Cahill says she had fallen asleep at her uncle's home in Ballymurphy.
I don't even remember going to sleep on the settee, but I certainly remember waking up and immediately knew something wasn't right. Someone had their hands down my trousers trying to get the trousers off, and it clicked. Marty Morris is here. He had a distinct smell of a mixture of roll-up cigarettes and links. I knew him by his breathing. And the only thing that I remember then at that point is the thoughts, please let this stop. What am I going to do? I wouldn't have been a religious person at that point, but praying in your head and not being able to get to a prayer from start to finish because you get mixed up in it, not being able to think clearly, and the only description that I have for that is it's like white noise. Once the first rape happened, you feel like a piece of dirt, you don't feel like you're worth anything. Essentially at 16, I was still a kid, and like that was it. The whole point of childhood was just completely erased, and you then become something that belongs to him. I don't even think you become human anymore.
Maria Cahill says the abuse ended after a year when she stopped going to the house where Martin Morris lived.
People will understand the confusion after the first alleged incident, but people might find it harder to get their heads around the fact that you went back to that location.
Yeah. I don't think there's any way of explaining it in a way that people will fully understand it. But even without meaning to, you take all that shame and guilt and it turns into responsibility, and you believe yourself to be responsible for what is happening to you. One of the biggest regrets in my life was not disclosing immediately that the abuse happened. And I probably will live with that for the rest of my life.
Martin Morris was acquitted of rape and sexual abuse when the prosecution offered no evidence against him. Maria Cahill withdrew her allegations before they could be tested in court. But years earlier, they had already been investigated by members of the Republican movement. As the Republican movement marched further into the peace process, Maria Cahill became more involved in Republican politics, taking part in protests and appearing in TV interviews.
Disbandment for me would be the ultimate, the change which has to be made. I don't think changes to names or moving certain personnel out and putting other people in is acceptable. It's really a whitewash.
While still a teenager, she was elected National Secretary of Sinn Féin's Youth Wing, and she starred in this party election broadcast.
When I got elected to the National Secretary, I didn't even attend that meeting in Dublin because my grandmother had been taken ill and was in the hospital. So the first that I even knew that I was up for election and had been put into that position was when Jerry Kelly actually and Bobby Story sent me over a drink in the Hercules bar to congratulate me, and I thought they were winding me up.
An articulate young woman carrying a name revered in Republican circles. In the heady days just after the Good Friday Agreement, Maria Cahill looked like the future of Sinn Féin. But behind her public role, Maria Cahill was telling her allegations of sexual abuse to other women. She says she told a number of women inside the Republican movement, her cousin Siobhan, as well as her friend Rosa McLaughlin, who had recently been convicted of spying for the IRA, and a woman she worked with at the radio station, Sinn Féin MLA Sue Ramsey. That's when Maria Cahill says her second nightmare began. Then, 18 years old, she was summoned, she says, to a meeting with the IRA. She can't be sure how the IRA found out she was making allegations about Martin Morris, but according to her, they did. In West Belfast, Maria Cahill is taking me back along the same route she was driven when she was taken to her first interrogation by the IRA.
So Maria, you were 18 years of age when somebody you believed to be in the IRA said, "We need to see you tonight." Can you recall how you were feeling? Were you frightened?
Oh, beyond fright at that point. And that feeling where everything's kind of right up at your throat. At that time, in West Belfast, the IRA were the authority figure in this area, and you knew it wasn't good news when somebody came and said, "We need to see you later." and wouldn't tell you what it was about. So I think the natural reaction for anybody would be to panic.
She says she was driven by this woman, longtime Republican Breed Wright, seen here at the funeral of a leader of Cumann na mBan, the women's IRA.
She stopped the car outside a house, walked me up into an upstairs flat, and she sat down at the other end of the table, and a guy came in. And that I knew at that point when he walked through the kitchen door that I was in deep, deep trouble.
This is the man she says came into the flat.
My name's Seamus Finucane. I'm a brother of murdered solicitor Pat Finucane.
Seamus Finucane was instantly recognisable as a member of the IRA throughout the community. He didn't really say very much. He stood blocking the doorway with his arms folded, and she basically just started by saying, "We're here on behalf of Ugly na Heron." Although she couldn't say Ugly na Heron properly, she got stuck a few times and then said the army. And we're here because we've heard that you've made an allegation about Marty Morris. He's a volunteer in the army, he has rights. We're here to investigate that. We also are here to protect the organisation. We can't be seen to be having abusers in our ranks, and you need to tell us what happened. And I went to pieces very, very quickly. She asked me, did he rape me? I nodded, yes. I said to her, can you not just go away? I don't want to talk about this. I'm not ready to talk about it. I didn't ask you. Why are you involved in this?
Maria Cahill says she was too embarrassed to talk in front of Seamus Finucane, so the next day she was brought to the Falls Road for a second round of questioning. This time Breed Wright was accompanied by another woman.
I was taken to another meeting, and that was the start of the only word I have for it is interrogation, because that's exactly how it felt. I was absolutely petrified. I don't have any other word to describe it, that fear. There was a load of questions fired at me, and I broke down. I kind of got my head in my hands and said to them, I don't want to talk about this. Why are you asking me this? I think I repeated that a couple of times.
3, 2, 1.
As Northern Ireland celebrated the start of the new millennium, Maria Cahill says she was in the middle of an extended interrogation. She says the IRA questioned her repeatedly, often several nights a week, for months. I've come to speak to Foyle Women's Aid Director Mary Brown, who first heard Maria Cahill's story in 2006.
She had the trauma of being picked up randomly and not knowing when it was going to happen, and then being questioned and interrogated. I don't know if they didn't believe her or if they thought they'd lift her so often that they would get her to retract what she was saying.
Maria Cahill says she was living in the shadow of a secret IRA investigation into sexual abuse allegations. She says the pressure was unbearable, particularly because she had been ordered not to speak about it to anyone, including her parents, who were already concerned about changes in her behaviour.
I had a row in the house one night just after having a very heavy meeting with Breed, and I got very angry and went up the stairs and got into bed, and my mum came up and asked me outright, "What's wrong, Maria? Has anybody touched you?" And I had been told that I wasn't allowed to tell anybody by the IRA what had been going on, and I had to look at my mummy and I shook my head and turned round. So, I mean, that's one of the other big regrets then, that I just didn't defy what they had told me to do, and I couldn't even go to my own parents and say, this is what's happened.
To hold a young woman like that and to do that to her and to traumatise her without her parents. You know, nobody knew that that was happening to her, and a real sense of that, you know, that they could kill her, and that was a real fear for her.
Just the one there.
Okay, we'll go down and just turn around and try and...
Maria Cahill is showing me where she was taken for what she says was the most harrowing episode of the IRA investigation. After 6 months of questioning, she was brought to an upstairs flat belonging to Breed Wright's sister Mari, who is now dead. There, she says, she was brought face to face with Martin Morris for a Kangaroo court session that was supposed to determine the truth.
He told me that they were going to read my body language to see who was telling the truth and that they were going to bring him into a room. I immediately panicked because the one thing that you don't want to do is come face to face with the guy who has abused you. And it was a massive panic. And they picked me up then at 6 o'clock on the actual day and drove me up to here, and it was dark outside. I heard the door going, I heard the footsteps coming up into the room, and they then basically allowed Morris for a number of hours to tear strips off me. You're sick, you're saying that I did this, I didn't do this. What is wrong with you? You're wired up to the Black Mountain. Can you not get a boyfriend? Why would I? You're saying I did this. Breed was writing stuff down. She always had a notebook. Sorry, I'm shaking that she wrote stuff down in. And he, again, was getting really irate, and I started to become really off the scale in terms of anger then. And I was saying to him, do you know something? I don't even care whether you just go back to your life and nobody even knows anything else about this. All you have to do, you know what you did, and I know what you did, and all you have to do is say, yes, this happened. I don't even want an apology from you. I just want you to say in front of these people that this happened. And he said, you're a sick bastard. And at that point then, I was taken out of the room. I think I had just lost it in terms of anger. I think it was designed to put me under as much pressure as possible to say, well, no, this never happened, he never did this. And then they could just explain it all by saying, well, she's a liar and we've investigated this and everybody goes back. That wasn't happening.
For Maria, I think that was the worst part. It would be hugely damaging to anybody. And to remember, no matter how confident or smart she was a young woman. She was 18. She should have been out enjoying herself, and she was going through this, turmoil. And it had a devastating impact on her.
Ailish O'Hanlon is Maria Cahill's cousin and a columnist for Dublin's Sunday Independent. She is also a sister of Siobhan O'Hanlon and a member of the wider Cahill family, although she is known for criticising the Republican movement in her writing. She says the IRA should have known better than to put Martin Morris and Maria together in the same room.
This is not the dark days of the 1970s and the 1980s, this investigation that happened to her. This is 1999, the year 2000, and this is a time when we knew, all the allegations about the church had already come out, and we did know how you were supposed to deal with these people, and it wasn't to put them in a room with hostile people.
Months of investigation and questioning, followed by the forced confrontation between Maria Cahill and Martin Morris, had effectively come to nothing. Maria Cahill says the IRA investigators told her they did not know who to believe. The IRA then decided to tell her parents about their investigation. Maria Cahill's parents have confirmed to Spotlight that the family was visited by Seamus Finucane and Breed Wright. They say they were told the IRA investigation was inconclusive and told of inconsistencies in the details of Maria's abuse allegations.
Finucane became very arrogant and he became quite aggressive actually. And my mum was shouting at him. She had child protection training, she was a teacher, and she was shouting, do you understand the damage that you have done? And my daddy then got extremely angry and said to them, no, you didn't have a right. to become involved in this. You should never have got yourselves involved with this. She needs to go to the police. And the two girls looked at each other and looked at him, Finucane, and he said, that's not an option. And my dad said, what the F do you mean it's not an option? And he said, I'm telling you that's not an option.
Maria Cahill was still politically opposed to the RUC and says she was not ready to defy the IRA and go to the police. Her parents convinced her to see a counsellor. These are the notes from those sessions made by her counsellor.
There's a note there from the 10th of April 2000, which is just after I started with the counsellor. Group dictated to me when I could tell my family. Forced to go into a room with him so they could observe who was telling the truth. There's a note from the counsellor from the 31st of July 2000. IRA told me they cannot do anything unless I'm prepared to give further evidence.
The notes support her account of a secret investigation, and that's exactly what appeared to worry the IRA.
The IRA wanted to find out exactly what I was discussing in the counselling room, and they used Siobhan to try and get that information. I had a row with Siobhan, and I was in the car with her. She was dropping me home, and she asked me to tell her what I was discussing with this counsellor, and I said no. And she got really irate and was kind of thumping her steering wheel and said, why are you not telling me? And I said, because it's the only thing that I have for myself.
At that stage, it was becoming impossible to keep Maria Cahill's allegations a secret within the IRA. And as the knowledge spread, even hardened Republican supporters questioned whether the IRA had any business investigating allegations of sexual abuse. In July 2000, the Cahill family was suddenly told that Martin Morris had been placed under house arrest by the IRA. Maria Cahill had an emotional meeting with her great-uncle Joe.
He cried and I cried, and he said to me, had I known about this, I would have told you to go to the RUC. That surprised me because I didn't expect that from an older man, never mind an older Republican, never mind someone who you felt would have or should have supported the IRA in their actions. And he was quite angry, actually. And he said to me, there's been a fuck-up of the highest order in the movement.
There was now clearly a deep division between those who wanted the allegations kept within the IRA and those in the Cahill family who wanted to go to the police. Maria Cahill says Seamus Finucane came to announce a second IRA investigation, but she says she was now prepared to report Martin Morris to the RUC.
Finucane said, we need to reinitiate the investigation. And my dad said, she's going to the police, meaning me. She should have went originally, she's going now. And I said to Seamie, I need to go and report this. And Seamie put his hands behind his head and he sat back and he said, okay, want to go to the RUC, Maria? Just have a wee think about this. He's under house arrest at the minute. And if you want to go to the RUC, not a problem, I'll let him go now. And I can't guarantee you that you're not going to bump into him in half an hour's time, an hour's time, whenever you're out doing your shopping, 3 months' time. And that was the end of any option of going to the RUC, because basically what he was saying to me was, I'm going to let him loosen you if you go and report him.
Maria Cahill says the IRA then tried to get her family to say they wanted Morris shot. She was summoned to meet Breed Wright in Jerry Adams' office.
And she pointed at the light on the ceiling and went like that. And that I knew immediately was, don't say this out loud in case intelligence are listening. I mean, that was very clear without that even having to be explained. And she wrote on a small piece of paper in relation to Morris, what do you want to happen to him? And she passed it across the table. And I knew that she was trying to put the responsibility for what would happen, or she wanted me to think that that was my responsibility. And I put my 2 fingers to my head like that. like a gun. And I said, see that? I don't want that on my conscience.
Maria Cahill's father has told us Siobhan O'Hanlon was even more explicit to him, asking him if he wanted Martin Morris shot. He says he also refused and repeated that he wanted the matter turned over to police. Perhaps not surprisingly, Martin Morris fled Belfast soon after. The Cahills were told he escaped. They say this man came to explain Morris's sudden disappearance on behalf of the IRA. Padraig Wilson was the IRA commander in the Maze prison. The British government believed he was an important champion of the peace process inside the IRA. So important that he was temporarily freed from jail to attend Republican meetings. He was finally released in 1999 under the Good Friday Agreement. Maria says he met her and members of her family several times.
Padraig then came down to try and smooth the waters over with my father, who was still adamant that he was going to the RUC and that this was a disgrace. And he was very strongly saying, you knew that that's where we wanted to go, and you got rid of him before we could do it. I couldn't then speak because I was crying so much, and I was saying to him, I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for you to become involved. I didn't want to tell anybody about this. This is embarrassing for me to have to talk about. And yeah, I probably would have got a better deal from the RUC.
Maria Cahill says that Padraig Wilson told her he was meeting her on behalf of the IRA leadership. But she says she was also to meet the man at the top of the Republican movement, Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams.
I think, looking back in hindsight, the meetings with Adams were another arm for the IRA to be able to keep me in my box. They weren't going to go outside of their parameters and tell people what had happened. You weren't going to go and report it.
She says the meeting was the first of several with Gerry Adams about her allegations of sexual abuse.
Part of that conversation surrounded, the usual, you need to look after yourself. I love you. We love you. You can come to me at any time and I'll help you out. And there was another bit of conversation that went on generally about Gerry and how Gerry knew all about sexual abuse and the devastating effects that it could have on people. And I looked out the window at the traffic going past behind him, and a tourist bus had pulled up. I always remember it because it was really surreal. There were people out taking photographs of the office that the two of us were sitting in. And at that point then, yes, it did kind of hit me that I was sitting with the person who was the head, the public figure of the Republican movement. But the most disturbing thing of that conversation for me was then he said, well, Maria, abusers can be extremely manipulative, and and he kind of put his hand on his chin and he sat forward a wee bit and he said, sometimes they're that manipulative that the people who have been abused actually enjoy it. I was absolutely horrified, and I, at that point, got very, very angry and said to him, well, I didn't enjoy it. And at that, the meeting was over for me. There was no point.
During that meeting, did you get a sense that he had distanced himself from the actions of the IRA?
He apologised. He apologised on behalf of the Republican movement for what had happened to me.
What was he sorry for?
Well, again, ask him. Because for me, it was very clear that Gerry was not apologising on behalf of Sinn Féin. Gerry was apologising for the IRA actions in relation to what happened with me.
By speaking out publicly, are you, in effect, just trying to damage Sinn Féin?
No. I really, at this stage, couldn't give two hoots what happens to Sinn Féin or what they do. Again, we're back to the issue of responsibility and frustration and cover-up. And I think there has been a colossal attempt to cover this issue up.
This is a copy of Sinn Féin's constitution from 1999, the year the IRA began investigating Maria Cahill's allegations. These rules explicitly require members to report sexual abuse allegations to the party's executive, the Ard Comhairle. According to Maria Cahill, a range of Republicans knew about her allegations at that time, including the party president, Gerry Adams. We asked Sinn Féin if anyone had reported Maria Cahill's allegations to the Ard Comhairle, but they did not reply to that specific question. Sinn Féin said their position is the interests of victims of sexual abuse are always paramount. One of the most striking things is the number of women in the Republican movement who Maria Cahill says she disclosed the abuse allegations to. But not one of those women, she says, encouraged her to bring those allegations forward. As we know, Sue Ramsey, along with Siobhan O'Hanlon and Rosa McLaughlin, were some of the women Maria Cahill says she told the abuse allegations to. Siobhan O'Hanlon is now dead. We've written to Sue Ramsey and Rosa McLaughlin. Sue Ramsey says she fully cooperated with the police investigation. Rosa McLaughlin said she made a statement that was provided to the police and points out that Martin Morris was acquitted.
I'm not of the opinion that women in positions of power will act any differently from men in positions of power. And I think that anybody in those organisations, their number one priority is to that organisation and how they can protect it and how they can shelter it from any bad allegations or shelter it from things that are going to be bad for its reputation. They didn't allow victims to go to the police. They swore them to secrecy. They did everything that the Catholic Church was guilty of doing.
You remained working with Sinn Féin after the investigation. Why would you want to be in their company?
I think I was just sucked into a place at that time where I didn't even know, and I do take the point, again, hindsight is a wonderful thing, but at that time, there was nowhere else for me to go.
Maria Cahill struggled in the years after the IRA investigation. By the time Joe Cahill died in 2004, she was no longer one of Sinn Féin's favoured faces. She abused alcohol and wound up in psychiatric care after 2 suicide attempts. Breed Wright, who Maria says was often sympathetic to her, called with her at one of her lowest points and ended up bringing Maria to the Mater Hospital.
She started talking about the IRA investigation originally, and I got very upset. And she said to me, "Do you know something, Maria? I'm kind of glad to see you crying because you sat through all of that like a robot." And I said to her, I sat like a robot because I couldn't allow myself to feel anything. And she apologised and said, "We re-traumatised you." And that was the first admission from someone involved in all of that it was wrong and that it wasn't my fault.
Breed Wright's solicitor has told us she denies Maria Cahill's account of the IRA investigation.
Oh, I knew it was going to happen every time. I just did. It was just an instinct, or because it had happened so many times, I just knew.
In December 2009, Maria Cahill watched Gerry Adams' niece Anya speak about abuse by her father Liam.
I immediately went to pieces, and I probably scared myself at how quick it happened overnight. I cried most of the night, and then I got extremely angry. I was completely traumatised by it because it brought all of my stuff back up again.
She then gave an anonymous interview to a newspaper. In response to the article, Seamus Finucane and Padraig Wilson both issued statements admitting contact with Maria Cahill. They both said they wanted to bring her allegations to social services, but Padraig Wilson says Maria refused. Seamus Finucane said, "I want to make it clear that I did my best to resolve this serious matter." And Padraig Wilson said, "My only involvement was to try and give constructive advice in a very sensitive and traumatic situation." We asked Seamus Finucane and Padraig Wilson what their roles were in meeting Maria Cahill. They have not responded. Their solicitor told us they deny her account. Jerry Adams also responded to the newspaper article in a BBC interview.
Did you have any role in asking Pádraig Wilson and Seamus Finucane to go on behalf of the Republican movement to speak to one of the women involved and to see if anything could be done to resolve the issues that she had?
No, and I understand that both those young people who I think been grievously wronged have issued statements in that regard.
Now, this is not the words of a man who wants to help the victim. This is the words of a man who is trying to protect his own organisation from any sort of allegations that make them look bad. His first instinct was to come out and try and help Wilson and Finucane, and she was irrelevant to him.
Maria Cahill also finally went to the police, the PSNI. She spent hours making statements that detailed her allegations of abuse and the IRA investigation.
I had no other way of telling what happened to me without mentioning and giving evidence in relation to the IRA, simply because they were the people who took it upon themselves to involve themselves, and they didn't have a right to ask me what had happened to me, and they certainly didn't have a right to order me to attend meetings. It was an illegal organisation who basically Kangaroo courted themselves through a process and put me right in the middle of it. What part about that was I expected to leave out?
But Maria was to regard the approach adopted by the PSNI as far from satisfactory, something she puts down to the political sensitivities surrounding some of her allegations. They took immediate action on the sex abuse allegations. Martin Morris was arrested at his new home here in London and brought back to Belfast to face charges. But months went by before the PSNI sought anyone for questioning about the IRA investigation. In fact, it took more than 2 years to bring charges against Pádraig Wilson, Breed Wright and Seamus Finucane. They appeared in court, but the media was banned from reporting their names. Maria Cahill and the BBC successfully challenged that ban in court. By the time the identities of the accused became public, the case was being raised behind the scenes at Westminster. Mark Durkin, who knows Maria Cahill, says other MPs began raising the case with him.
MPs shared with me that they had received briefings from Sinn Féin MPs who were very concerned by what they said was political policing.
He also says former Secretary of State Sean Woodward spoke to him in the House of Commons about Pádraig Wilson.
He asked me if I was concerned about what was happening to poor Pádraig, and he referred to the issues and the difficulties and the concerns that he was aware that Sinn Féin had, and that this all had to be very worrying for the process. And I asked him if he was aware of what was fully involved. I referred to the prevailing mood and attitude that was in the air on the back of the Jimmy Savile situation, and he just simply said that we couldn't go pursuing people around these sorts of issues.
Sean Woodward told us it is inaccurate and misleading to say he referred to Pádraig Wilson as poor Pádraig. He said he was unaware of any political lobbying. He said he has always been consistent in believing no one is above the law, and he has always supported police investigations in Northern Ireland. 4 years after she first went to the police, Maria Cahill was still waiting. None of the accused had been brought to trial, and as the cases dragged on, other important witnesses dropped out. Solicitor Alison Miller represents some alleged victims of historic child sexual abuse in England.
This is an unusual case in that there were allegations of membership of a prescribed political party as well as abuse complicating the matter. But I think the delay is quite striking, the delay between the initial complaint and the trial, first trial. 4 years does seem a relatively long time for a case of abuse to be processed through the criminal justice system. Just to give some comparators, in England here we have had high-profile criminal investigations into celebrities like Rolf Harris and Max Clifford. And in those cases, it has taken the police and prosecution authorities less than 2 years between the initial interview and the conviction.
I know from conversations that I had with Maria at the time that she was almost suffocating with frustration, and obviously was being left just confused and suspicious as to what exactly was going on. That greater interests and darker calculations seemed to be prevailing over and above what should have been the natural course.
Mary Brown sat with Maria Cahill as she made some of her statements to the police.
Sometimes going through the justice system is equally, if not more, traumatic than the actual events. And Maria found it very traumatic because as strong and as willful as Maria was on one hand, she was frail in another. And, justice can be blind, but it shouldn't be stupid.
The PSNI's 2 investigations turned into 3 potential trials. One for Martin Morris on a charge of IRA membership, a second for the allegations of sexual abuse against him, and a third for those accused of carrying out the IRA investigation. Maria Cahill would be required to testify in court 3 times. As the first trial approached in April this year, she prepared and signed statements saying she would withdraw from the cases. The people she accused would say that's because she realised her story would not stand up to scrutiny in court. She says that as the time passed, she was losing confidence in police. These are the counselling notes that show 10 years before going to the police, Maria Cahill was telling the same story about abuse allegations and the IRA investigation. This is potentially important evidence in a case of child sexual abuse. In England, Crown Prosecution Service guidelines say investigators should seek to secure them at an early stage. We've spoken to the counsellor who wrote these notes, which is more than the PSNI did. The counsellor has confirmed to Spotlight that these are her case notes and that she was willing to make a statement to police. But 4 years after Maria Cahill made her complaint, the PSNI had not contacted the counsellor to verify the notes were hers.
Well, it sounds like Maria went to see the counsellor relatively soon after the abuse took place. So those would be corroborative evidence that this had happened to her, and that she was reporting that on to the counsellor. I think it, potentially significant and useful information for the police to obtain and to be used in the prosecution process.
As the years passed, Maria Cahill was wavering. She threatened to withdraw her evidence on more than one occasion, and she frequently questioned the decisions of police and prosecutors. Some of her questions focused on Gerry Adams' bodyguard, Joe McCulloch. As we know, Maria Cahill said he and Martin Morris asked her to move guns for the IRA, an incident that she says put Morris in a position of power over her. She thought the police and prosecution should know in advance if Joe McCulloch would come to court and deny the story. These emails show her repeatedly asking if the PSNI had tried to question him.
It was almost like banging your head off a brick wall, for the guts of a couple of years, saying, have you questioned this guy yet? When are you going to question him? Are you going to question him? What's happening with him? What happens if he turns up as a defence witness?
And that's exactly what happened. In April this year, Maria Cahill was on the verge of withdrawing when prosecutors persuaded her to go ahead and give her evidence in Martin Morris's IRA membership trial. But just as she predicted, Joe McCulloch turned up in court as a defence witness. Maria's cousin, Ailish O'Hanlon, was supporting her in court that day.
A man came out of the lift. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know anything about him. Maria said, that's Joe McCulloch. And I said, and what? And she said, well, this is going to have terrible consequences for the case, because if he's turned up and if they call him as a witness, the case is finished, it's closed, it's done and dusted.
Ailish O'Hanlon says the prosecution seemed defeated.
The whole atmosphere changed, and it was clearly they now felt that Joe McCulloch turning up had a catastrophic effect on the case, because now it was going to be two witnesses. It was going to be Joe McCulloch and Martin Morris against Maria, and in those circumstances, and now they didn't think that they could secure a conviction. And I just thought to myself, it's amazing. It's astonishing that this case, which has taken 4 years, it was 2010 she first reported it, now we're in 2014, and I just thought it was astonishing really that it had taken a man to turn up in court on one day for that case to collapse.
Joe McCulloch's solicitor has told Spotlight he had no hesitation in coming to court to testify for the defence, and he would have said Maria Cahill's account was nonsense and a fabrication. 3 days before the trial, the PSNI told Maria Cahill in a face-to-face meeting that they didn't think Joe McCulloch would talk, and they said they had little intelligence to support her claim that he was in the IRA. A senior police detective told Maria Cahill they did not question Mr McCulloch because there's very little on him, a couple of driving offences probably. But Spotlight found more than a little about Joe McCulloch. We've learned that he was a remand prisoner on an IRA wing in the Maze prison a few months before Maria Cahill says he was asking her to move guns for the IRA. He was even listed as a Republican prisoner in the Republican newspaper on Phoblacht. Joe McCulloch is now a taxi driver who conducts tours of West Belfast murals. Here he is on a tour with Seamus Finucane. Joe McCulloch denies having been in the IRA, but he tells tourists he was Jerry Adams' head of security for 7 years. And he says he was arrested on suspicion of IRA activity and was twice held for extended periods on remand in IRA prison wings. He was acquitted each time. Maria Cahill says she lost faith in the justice system the day Joe McCulloch turned up in court. She withdrew her evidence from the remaining cases. The prosecution presented no evidence against Martin Morris, Seamus Finucane, Padraig Wilson and Breed Wright. Another woman, Agnes McCrory, had been deemed unfit to stand trial on medical grounds. She and the other defendants were acquitted of all charges after Maria Cahill withdrew her evidence against them. You walked away from it all.
After 4 years of sitting in the process, Jennifer, I believed that the PPS and the police had seriously lost the case before they had even went into the courtroom. I was very aware that there was a heavy political presence in the background and a vested interest, if you like, that these people would not be charged, and all of that was in the mix also. I weighed up every single option repeatedly for a number of months, but when the IRA membership trial for Morris fell, it effectively had a domino effect on the other trials that were due to take place.
But with respect, you didn't stay the course.
I did stay the course for 4 years. You know, again, you're let down by the agencies who are supposed to protect your right to have justice through a court of law. That's the proper arena that it should have been brought into.
Maria Cahill maintains her allegations about Martin Morris are true. He maintains they are false, and he was found not guilty by a court of law. The whole truth of what happened cannot be known to anyone apart from those two people. But a much wider circle of people are aware of what happened after she told her story, of how the IRA became centrally involved.
I think what happened to her was absolutely appalling. I can't emphasise enough that she was only 18, she'd only left school, and she was just a very young woman, you know, barely beyond girlhood really, and to be confronted with what she was confronted with is, I mean, defies belief.
Was it worth going through the court process, do you think?
I lost every family relationship that I had outside of my immediate family. The mentality in that side of the extended family and also the community was that you do not go into a court, and you most certainly do not go to the police and name members of the IRA. Was it worth it in terms of not getting any sense of accountability? Probably not. Was it the right thing to do? Absolutely yes.
The absolute strength of character that Maria has shown has in many ways been spat back at her by a system which, for whatever reason, has decided to close down on what should be its channel of proper accountability.
Tonight, Spotlight successfully resisted an attempt to injunct the programme. The PSNI said it could not comment on its investigations into Maria Cahill's allegations because she has made a complaint to the police ombudsman. The prosecution service told us that complex and interlinked cases like these take time to bring to a full hearing, and they make their decisions on prosecutions without fear or favour. Jerry Adams said he cooperated with the PSNI investigation and has no further comment to make. Sinn Féin said the matters we've investigated tonight should not be subject to trial by media. Maria Cahill's former party also advised that if Spotlight had any information that could assist due process, it should be brought to the police.